The Carolina Panthers have a bright future. One may cite the draft selection of Bryce Young, but there's much more to their upside than just that, including an immense amount of youth and a strong offseason. I think the bright future shines early on with an NFC South title in 2023. I'm Chase Keller, and tune into this deep dive of the Carolina Panthers roster, why I believe they're going to finish 9-8, and why they came up in 20th in my 2023 NFL Power Rankings. The obvious portion of this upside is the addition of quarterback Bryce Young, the #1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. I've discussed Bryce Young in so many of my videos, and in fact, my first ever full-length video was a scouting report on him. If you're a loyal viewer, you know how much I love Bryce Young. If you're new to the channel, let me explain. Despite the concerning measurements, Young plays like he's the prototypical size. His best trait is his poise, which is the thing I look for most in a quarterback. He doesn't panic under pressure, and he is elite at maintaining his attributes while seeing a collapsing pocket. The poise is nowhere near all BY has to offer. His arm talent is solid, his accuracy is the best in the draft class, and while he doesn't like to scramble, his mobility is still on par with a typical quarterback. That in itself proves that Carolina had no better option than taking BY with the first overall pick. The only knock that I had against Bryce Young was that his arm strength isn't great, and he is a little inconsistent when throwing the deep ball. If BY goes down, Carolina signed one of the best backup quarterbacks in Andy Dalton. While his buzz as a starting quarterback has fallen off, he is still worthy of a backup position after having solid stints with Chicago and New Orleans the last 2 seasons. Alongside that, this offense saw a lot of playmaking additions this offseason, so it's safe to say that Bryce Young is going to have great surround sound right out the gate. Carolina lost Christian McCaffrey to trade during the 2022 season and rocked with Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard for the remainder of the season. Assuming that the franchise believed this group was a bit dull, they made some big moves to give BY that true #1 running back. Of course, I'm talking about Miles Sanders, a free agency pickup from Philadelphia. After a 1,269 rushing yard season, Sanders moved on to a situation where he has the opportunity to be the sole rusher in an offense. I absolutely loved the progress that Sanders made in 2022 after consistent 700 to 800 rushing yard seasons in the first 3 years of his career. The only knock? He was utilized in one of the greatest rushing offenses in NFL history last season. No recency bias there at all. And I'm sorry if my thoughts on Chuba Hubbard sounded negative. I really liked him as a prospect, and I like him even more now. He has had quite the journey in my overall system, as he started at a 71 overall being a mid-second round talent. A disappointing rookie season helped him fall to a 70, and a starting opportunity elevated him back to a 76. I know that this team has Sanders now, but I'm still hoping we see a lot of Hubbard in 2023. If Carolina doesn't utilize him properly, I would really like to see him in an offense where he has the opportunity to become the running back #1. The positional group that looks the most refurbished is the wide receiver room, which while losing DJ Moore and failing to add a true wideout 1, they added more security for potential injuries and overall depth. It starts with DJ Chark, who I believe is starting to become more underrated as time goes on. Sure, he is on his 3rd team in the last 3 seasons, but he is much better of a deep threat than he gets credit for. He averaged 16.7 yards per reception in 2022, and I'm surprised Detroit wasn't able to retain him going into 2023. Adam Thielen was an iffy contract for me, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that he is a great wide receiver too. He has the reliability in holding onto the ball with 3 drops on 193 targets throughout his last 2 seasons with Minnesota. Laviska Shenault is another underrated wideout with wide receiver 2 talent, and according to head coach Frank Reich, he matches with Deebo Samuel, and the playbook should replicate that this season. For that reason, he has a breakout grade. And even though the volume went away with Carolina in 2022, he still showed some damn great efficiency. I can totally see the Deebo Samuel switch happening, as he does have reliability in the short game along with open field athleticism. Outside of the first 3, you got an uprising LSU guy in Terrace Marshall Jr., who can now build chemistry with DJ Chark, a fellow LSU product. And there's also Jonathan Mingo, who I wasn't a fan of him for selection because of the positional need, but as a player, he's still very promising. As an Ole Miss product, he reminds me a lot of DK Metcalf, but with more upside as a prospect. I think his play strength comes close to matching Metcalf's out of college, and his route running seems more crisp. I'm expecting an extension of his route tree at the next level. The tight ends aren't as important as the wideouts. Hayden Hurst was another notable addition this offseason, and previously known as a reliable pass blocker, that reputation has taken a free fall since the 2020 season. Despite that, he's still a semi-reliable receiver, and he can work as a tight end one. We can just hope that his yards per reception doesn't continue to decline as this year comes on. Tommy Tremble is someone I liked as a prospect, but he hasn't given me a wow factor just yet, which explains his 3 overall drop since his first season. My biggest takeaway of his was that he has the upside to be a great receiving tight end, and all he has shown me is that he can sometimes catch the football. Dropping 4 passes on only 63 targets is concerning. At least he's shown me that he can substitute as an extra blocker on some snaps. The offensive line is also starting to arise as a top tier one, but the rating gets heavily impacted by offensive guard Brady Christensen. I don't like him as much more than a backup offensive lineman. His run blocking has been bottom tier, and his pass blocking only showed above average flashes. Outside of Christensen though, this offensive line has great upside, and I'm excited to see the direction they go in 2023. The offensive tackles in rising Ikem Ekwonu and proven Taylor Moton is a perfect combination of exterior pass blockers to protect the young gun in Bryce Young. At least that's the hope with Ekwonu. Outside of Christensen, the other guys consist of very solid all-around interior blockers in center Bradley Bozeman and right guard Austin Corbett. So I am hoping that this offensive line positively contributes to Bryce Young's development. Besides, the amount of quality pass blockers shouldn't scare BY anyways. To summarize, this offense clearly made some quality changes in order to help one of the best quarterback prospects in recent memory. It is now all in Bryce Young's hands to follow through with the high upside of this offense. So let's get to the other side of the ball. The defense showed flashes of greatness during last season. From having 5 games of allowing 14 or fewer points, including 2 times to the Saints, once for the Bucs, and even once to the Lamar Jackson-led Ravens, they definitely had their moments. And I add on that adding new defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero, who I'll talk about in the next section, was a perfect addition to this up-and-coming defense. For now, this defensive roster doesn't even crack the top 20 across the NFL. Let me explain. The edge rushing group is not a great part to this defense despite having a top dog in Brian Burns. The uncertainty of that second edge rusher spot is going to cause some flusters in that positional group. Let's start with Brian Burns though, who I put at an 80 overall because I think you can find better talents across the league. Yet, I shouldn't underestimate the talent of Burns. Despite having mediocre run defending abilities, he constantly produces pressures in the pass game as he had 68 in 2022, which was good enough for 14th in the NFL. He also drops in coverage more than your typical edge rusher, and by being efficient in that category, he proves some all-around value. Now, the second rusher is where it gets confusing. There's a guy who hasn't lived up to my expectations, a veteran who isn't fantastic, and a 2023 undrafted rookie who I actually like more than the guy they drafted. As for Yetur Gross-Matos, he's only lost 2 overall points on my board since being drafted in the early second round in 2020. That's because he's played under 400 snaps in his first 2 seasons, and in an 800 snap season for year 3, he showed mediocrity everywhere with the exception of finishing plays whenever he gets that far. Marquise Haynes Sr. digged into some of Gross-Matos' snaps in 2022, and don't be surprised if he does it again in 2023. He is a decent pass rusher, but that's about all I can say. His run defense and finishing abilities are horrid. Iku Leota went undrafted in the 2023 NFL Draft, and I genuinely like him much more than the drafted DJ Johnson, who I had as an undrafted talent in an F-grade selection. Leota does show fantastic play strength as both a pass and run defender, but he is a little unathletic, which is likely the reason for his fall. The interior defensive line group is also underwhelming outside of the first option on the line. With Carolina now running a 3-4 defense, the amount of quality linemen is extremely important, but it's not too present on this defense. Derek Brown is that first option, a rising talent who receives my second of 3 breakout grades on this roster. Brown is an all-around defender who took a massive leap in both production and efficiency in 2022. Brown is an enticing player because on some boards he's very high as an interior D lineman, but on others he's not too high. As for me, I think his ranking could go a little bit higher this season. The free agency addition of Shy Tuttle was a solid one, especially considering that they stole him from division rival New Orleans Saints. Tuttle is a good run defender who has shown flashes of elite play in that aspect throughout his 4 years with New Orleans. We are down to Henry Anderson and Deshaun Williams for that number 3 lineman spot. Anderson is that veteran option who has 1 year of experience with Carolina's defense. He didn't play much, but when he did, he showed very solid run defense and he missed 0 tackles in 17 attempts last year. Williams is new to Carolina, as in 4 years of experience despite being drafted 8 years ago, it seems unlikely that he wins this spot. Yet he played 600 snaps under Ejiro Evero last year with Denver, and he showed production in the pass game, putting up 5 sacks and 8 hurries. Even after them, Jalen Redmond is a sleeper for this roster, as he has a high motor and grit for the game. Only problem is he has off-field issues and was underwhelming with Oklahoma. Now the linebacker group continues on with the non-average positional groups, but don't worry, the next 2 groups are the best 2 groups. We start with veteran Shaq Thompson, who isn't anything elite, but he will always provide quality starting snaps. He played the most snaps of his career in 2022, and he gave elite run defense and mediocre pass defense. It's a mixed bag for Thompson, but as long as he's giving those quality snaps, he deserves this linebacker 1 spot. After that, you have Frankie Louvu, who is beloved by Panthers fans, especially after putting together a very nice 2022 season. Beforehand, he was putting up low snap counts or bad seasons, or both. In 2022, he was also elite in run defense, but much better in pass rush when compared to Thompson. It seems crazy that with both of these great run defenders, this defense still finished in the back half of the rushing yards allowed ranking. Behind them, there isn't much to mention. Brandon Smith was a 4th round selection last year, and he barely played. And even when he did, he wasn't great. I already had an early 7th round grade on him last year, and he goes down 3 overall points from a 58 to a 55. And Kamu Grugier-Hill was one of the worst linebackers in the entire league last season. I won't be surprised if the Panthers let him go before the season starts. The defense shows both the most proven talent and promise in the secondary. I will start here with the cornerbacks, which despite receiving an average rating tag, it's got some of the best upside you can find in the NFL. J.C. Horn is my final breakout grade on this roster, as he's only an 82 overall because of his injury history. I'm expecting a huge breakout year from Horn if he stays healthy the entire season. Horn is immaculate in coverage, allowing some of the lowest passer ratings in the NFL the last 2 seasons. The talent is clearly there. I just hope we can see a fully healthy version of J.C. Horn. Dante Jackson is a decent cornerback too on this roster, but his coverage has been getting significantly worse since 2020. I am really pulling for a good recovery season out of him this season, but if it doesn't happen, I am expecting a round 2 cornerback selection from Carolina in the 2024 NFL Draft. Behind him, I have another undrafted steal in Rejjon Wright, who I have heard great things about to start the offseason, and apparently he gives his surroundings fantastic energy. From film takeaways, he had elite anticipation and instincts for a college cornerback. His athletic profile just isn't great. CJ Henderson has obviously been a bust, and he is losing his final touch. For now, he is still cornerback 4 on this roster at a 63 overall. The safety room finalizes this defense by being the best positional group here. Von Bell and Jeremy Chin highlight this group as 2 worthy starting safeties. Chin is much younger than Bell, but they both bring fantastic ability. Bell had 3 quality seasons with Cincinnati before departing for Carolina. He allowed 6 touchdowns in 2020, but since then, he has allowed 3, along with contributing 6 interceptions and 6 pass deflections. Chin hasn't showed as much promise as I was hoping, but he is still improving and is very young. He dealt with injury in 2022 and had mediocre flashes all around. 2021 is where I like to point to, where he only allowed 65.9% of his targets to be caught. Behind them, they actually have very solid depth. Xavier Woods is an underrated safety who could be a starter with many different teams. His run support is hard to find in a safety, as he is great at containing off the outside and is great at tackling as well, missing under 12% the last 3 seasons. Impressive for a safety. Jamie Robinson was a solid draft selection to round out a solid draft for Carolina. He brings more run support to the safety group along with smart decision making and solid coverage. To summarize, this defense has bright spots here and there, but it's not too impressive as a roster. Yet, with the Ejiro Evero at defensive coordinator in 2023, the ceiling is in the sky for this defense. So let's talk about Evero. The Carolina coaching staff is the best in the NFC South, despite the top 3 being brand new to the franchise. All 3 signings were phenomenal, and next year, this staff could damn near be a 10 out of 10 staff. Yet, both the offensive and defensive coordinator could see head coaching opportunities next season. It's never bad to completely revamp a coaching staff, especially in Carolina's situation. 2 of the top 3 coaches have experience in their position, and they have brought in a bunch of NFL leadership and experience from playing days onto their coaching staff now. In this section, I want to discuss the top 3, which is the head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator, and I want to explain how they have extremely high upside. On November 7th, 2022, the Indianapolis Colts inevitably fired their head coach in Frank Reich. I knew this was coming, and I believe the firing was justifiable at the time. As the 2022 season went on, the Colts' positional flaws began to come into the bigger picture, and the thought of Reich being the issue faded away. Now, Reich is the head coach of Carolina, and he actually has the worst grade of this top 3 at a B-. The one tag I would have against Reich is his inability to produce good quarterback play. While with Indy, his starting quarterback constantly changed and he could never get too productive of a season with any of them. Sure, the retirement of Andrew Luck may have commenced this issue, but are we just going to forget that Jacoby Brissett and Brian Hoyer led this team to 7-9 in 2018? Even before Indy, he was the Philadelphia offensive coordinator, and he helped develop Carson Wentz into an MVP candidate. Reich clearly had his positives before becoming Carolina's head coach, and heading into this stint, he brings experience, momentum, and reported leadership. How about the offensive coordinator hiring of Thomas Brown? I think this hiring went completely under the radar, and I have multiple reasons to believe this will become a great hire. First, Brown has been the assistant head coach for the Los Angeles Rams the past 2 seasons, including winning a Super Bowl as the assistant. He is giving up that role for the offensive coordinator position in Carolina, and to note, Deuce Staley is the assistant head coach. Before the LA Rams, he worked with different college teams including South Carolina, Miami, and his alma mater, Georgia. Altogether, he was the running backs coach for 7 different teams across 10 years, making a leap in either team reputation or position as time went on. So, what makes Brown so good? We are aware that he is close to head coach caliber, as he even had a head coaching interview with the Houston Texans before they hired DeMeco Ryans. He is also reportedly a great locker room piece, as he is a top-notch motivator alongside his great coaching abilities. Besides, he isn't even going to call the plays, so he's not the most important offensive piece for Carolina. The most important defensive piece is quite possibly the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. Ejiro Evero is a phenomenal DC, and trust me, I would know. Evero runs a 3-4 scheme, which will be different from Phil Snow's 2022 defense. Despite the scheme switch, Evero is elite at identifying talent and placing defenders in perfect positions. The 2022 Broncos defense had names like Baron Browning, Caden Stearns, Alex Singleton, Damari Mathis, and even new Carolina Panther Deshaun Williams see quality snaps. The upside is through the roof with an Evero-led defense, and while they may be 21st in defensive talent, this defense has top 5 upside with Evero at defensive coordinator. To summarize, sure, the Panthers coaching staff may include 3 new top 3 coaches, but with 2 of them having experience and 1 of them going under the radar, the upside is through the roof. So where do the Panthers end up across the league? Before I end the video, I want to go over how the Panthers got their ranking of 20th in the NFL. If you're interested to see how these ratings came about, I do have an explanation in the description below. The offense had a 74.99, which is 20th in the NFL, 8th in the NFC, and 2nd in the NFC South. The defense had a 72.97, which was 21st in the NFL, 9th in the NFC, and 3rd in the NFC South. The special teams had a 72.05, which is 16th in the NFL, 9th in the NFC, and 3rd in the NFC South. And the coaching had a 77 out of 80, which is tied for 16th in the NFL, tied for 8th in the NFC, and leading the NFC South. As an overall team, this team came out at a 74.86, which is 20th in the NFL, 8th in the NFC, and 1st in the NFC South. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I have 19 more teams to power rank, so you're in for a good ride. Once again, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for choosing this channel as your source of sports coverage. I'll see you guys in the next video.